Speaker Johnson was interviewed by Jake Tapper about the one big, beautiful bill. And of course, that one big, beautiful bill, as they would have you believe, it's great for the economy. It's not going to blow the budget as everybody knows it's going to blow the budget. It's not really going to transfer the wealth of middle-class Americans to the top. It's really just to get the waste and abuse out of the system. That is how they're characterizing this bill. Well, initially, when Jake Tapper started the interview, one would sort of believe that maybe he's going to really push the speaker to talk about what this bill is really going to do. So what I'm going to do is play you what I consider the representative segment of that interview. I'm going to play you the representative segment of that interview, and then we'll go ahead and dissect why this type of interview allows this bill to be pushed through and gives cover to the evil the bill actually represents. So I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Debt.
The number one threat to our nation right now is our debt. We take that very seriously. Congress has kicked the can down the road for decades, and we're out of road. And so we understand that it's our responsibility to fix this.
So there are 5 different independent scores of this legislation. Every one of them says that it will increase the deficit somewhere between $3.3 and $4 trillion over the next 10 years. Now, I get you take issue with the Congressional Budget Office and that they don't have dynamic scoring, all this. But this is the emerging consensus among everyone analyzing. They say not only are you kicking the can down the road, but you're making the problem worse. You're adding to the debt.
Well, I think that is dramatically overstated, and here's why. Those same groups can objectively see and acknowledge that this is the largest cut in spending in at least 30 years and arguably of all time. We're cutting over $1.5 trillion in federal spending while we check all the boxes and bring about a pro-growth economy. And the CBO has been panned because, as you said, they don't do dynamic scoring. What that means is they don't account for the growth that will be fostered by all the policies that are in this big piece of legislation. This is not theoretical, Jake. Just remember the last Trump administration. After the first 2 years, we brought about the greatest economy in the history of the world, not just the U.S. The growth was off the charts. It was an average of about 3% of growth in GDP. Why? Because we cut taxes and we cut regulations. We're doing the same thing this time around, but on steroids. This is a much larger package, a much more robust package with all these features that will really get the economy going because wages will rise, job creators, entrepreneurs, risk takers will have more ability to expand their businesses. U.S. manufacturing onshore is being incentivized. All these things will work together to make the economy grow faster than many of these projections are putting forth. So we're not buying it. We'll see what happens, and we have the evidence to prove it from the past.
So the CBO doesn't get a vote, but my next guest, Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, does. And he wrote in the Wall Street Journal, quote, "The one big, beautiful bill will almost certainly add to our deficits and debt." And he even called the bill the Titanic. What do you say to him?
Look, I love Ron Johnson. He's a dear friend, and he and I agree on our philosophy. We're limited government conservatives. We want to limit the size and scope of the government and make it work more efficiently and effectively. My response to him, and we've spoken about this over recent months, is that we're doing the best we can with the vote numbers that we have. In other words, we've got to turn this aircraft carrier. You don't turn an aircraft carrier on a dime. It takes a mile of open ocean to do it. And it took us decades to get in this financial situation. We can't just flip a switch and get out of it overnight. One of the people that my friend Ron Johnson really respects is Russ Vought, who directs the Office of Management and Budget. And Russ is a big champion for this piece of legislation. He calls it historic. And he's a fiscal hawk. And so am I. So we're doing as much as we can. And I just encourage Ron to remember, in the House, we have 220 Republicans, a wide range of perspectives and a wide range of districts represented. And I've got to get to 217 votes to get this thing over the line. So as much as we can in as big increment as we can, I think we've achieved that here. And I just want them to remember that we got to deal within the realm of what's possible.
Now, I want to remind everybody who Russ Vought is. Russ Vought is one of the major authors of Project 2025. And Jake Tapper simply ignored that comment that he made. But before we tackle anything else, I want to tackle what he talks about the Trump economy, because Natalie Lago gets it right when she says imaginary growth, just like a DJT 1.0 White House administration. She hits that on the nail when they talk about the growth that comes with tax cuts. Let's first remember something very important. Jake Tapper gave him a bone when he said, I know you don't listen to the CBO, but what you do is because the CBO don't take into account what's called dynamic scoring. Dynamic scoring is when they take a look at what the economic effects of any legislation have on the economy. Well, they always claim that tax cuts create an effect on the economy, which is positive to grow the economy. The thing about it is we have a whole lot of proof that that's not true. We have Ronald Reagan versus Bill Clinton. Under the Ronald Reagan economy, there were a lot of jobs created after a big recovery. Under Bill Clinton, it multiplied many more jobs than Reagan created. That isn't spoken about because, again, the right wing has a better PR department, and the mainstream media doesn't spend a whole lot of time refuting or telling the truth. When we look at Donald Trump's economy proper, says data show Trump didn't build a great economy. He inherited it from whom again? Obama. And if you want to look at the numbers, we can look at them simply. As far as GDP growth, Obama was coming out of a huge downturn in the economy, which took several years to recover. And even with that, in his second term, he had comparable growth rates to Donald Trump. 2.4 for Obama, 2.5 for Donald Trump. But here's the kicker. Under Obama, more jobs were created, 215 per month under Obama versus 182 per month under Donald Trump. And these numbers are pre the pandemic. So you cannot use a pandemic as an excuse. Okay. So when we take a look at what actually occurred, if you look at the Dow Jones, of course, Obama had the crash to contend with and come back. Again, comparable numbers up. Change in unemployment rate. Look at the trajectory of the charts. He's just a continuation of the Obama economy. So when they talk about Donald Trump having a great economy, it has just been the continuation of what has occurred. But when it comes to debt, Donald Trump added a hell of a lot of debt for that economy. In other words, his tax cuts created a whole lot of debt. And let me explain a little thing about debt. Debt creates great immediate economies. All right. If I have $10, if the government if I get a $10 tax cut, that's $10 I have that I can spend. And if the government still has to pay that $10 that it pays for healthcare or pay for SNAP or whatever, that $10 still gets paid. So therefore, if I give a $10 tax cut and the government still has to spend the same amount of money, and you have to borrow that money to spend it, that doubles the amount of economic activity. So it is true that spending creates a lot of good within the economy, and tax cuts can actually create more spending in the economy if that tax cut doesn't come with spending cuts. And that's what Reagan used. That's what Trump used to increase his economy, while fiscally responsible Clinton, fiscally responsible Obama, fiscally responsible Biden, they played with both of these numbers to ensure that we just don't go completely out of whack. All these things are in the numbers. The fiscally irresponsible folks are Republicans and what they're doing. Now, how does this match with the big, beautiful bill? First of all, when we look at that dynamic scoring, disregard the dynamic scoring. The economy under the first term of Donald Trump proved that dynamic scoring for tax cut is a hoax. In fact, when you talk about tax cuts versus spending, there's something called the multiplier effect. In other words, if I spend more money, how many times does that dollar circulate in the economy to increase the GDP, the gross domestic product? If I give a tax cut, how much times does that money circulate in the economy to give a tax cut? I mean, to create economic activity. The reality, folks, is that spending for things like education, spending for things like healthcare, spending for all these other things are much more multiplicative than tax cuts. And especially because tax cuts go to whom? Wealthier people. Even if everybody got a 2% tax cut, given that our wealth is so skewed towards the top, a 2% tax cut for somebody making $10,000 is only about $200. But a 2% tax cut for somebody making $2 million is over $200,000 in tax cuts, right? So, I mean, over $400 million in tax cuts. So let's understand how the system works all together and how this skewing to the top works. Jake Tapper did very little. In fact, he allowed the Speaker of the House, Johnson, to come on our air, to come on your air and lie to you as far as most of these tax cuts or the tax cuts that they're doing are somehow just going to be reflected onto those people who didn't deserve to have SNAP, those people who didn't deserve to have Medicaid. He spoke about able-bodied people working. Well, what happens if you're that able-bodied person taking care of somebody in hospice? What happens if you're an able-bodied person with 3 kids that you can't afford the care for those kids? There are reasons why these laws aren't written to say, well, if you can work, you get no care because you can work and there's a job available for you. If there's a job available for you, but you can't take care of your kids if you have that job, is there a job really available for you? If we had a society like many of the Scandinavian countries that really believe in family values, that really believe that if you are working, you deserve the support to have your kids taken care of if you can't be with them. If you had a humane system that says you deserve health care, whether you make $1,000 or $1 million, then it would make sense. Now, what Jake Tapper did is he allowed Johnson to come on air and spin several lies. One, that the cuts that they're making to Medicaid, that the cuts they're making to SNAP, that the cuts they're making to Meals on Wheels are those cuts that are for people that are undeserving of said aid. That's a lie. When he goes out there and he talks about dynamic scoring for this bill, that's a lie. When he goes out there and talks about the great economy that Donald Trump had, that's a lie. And when he goes ahead and talk about the deficit not being blown out of proportion by this bill, that's a lie. And what Jake Tapper did, he gave him a platform to plant those seeds.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.